The blizzard came early that November of 1881, catching Rebecca Barrett 3 miles from anywhere that mattered, with nothing but a lame horse, and the certainty that she would die alone in the Nevada wilderness. She had left White Pine that morning with foolish confidence, convinced she could reach the mining camp where her brother supposedly worked before the weather turned. But nature had other plans, and now the wind screamed through the mountains like 1,000 angry spirits, while snow transformed the landscape into an endless white grave. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago. The horse, a borrowed mare named Daisy, had stepped into a hidden hole and now limped beside her, both of them struggling through drifts that reached Rebecca's knees. She had wrapped every piece of clothing she owned around her body, but the cold cut through wool and cotton like they were made of paper. Her teeth chattered so violently she had bitten her tongue twice, and the metallic taste of blood mixed with the ice crystals forming on her lips. Rebecca was 22 years old, and she had survived things that would have broken weaker women. She had survived her father's death when she was 16, survived her mother's grief-driven madness that followed, survived the loss of their farm in Missouri to debt collectors who smiled while they stole everything. She had survived the brutal journey west, working as a laundress and cook in every town between St. Louis and Nevada, saving every penny to find her brother Thomas, the only family she had left in this world. But survival had its limits, and she felt herself reaching them as the storm intensified and darkness began to fall. She thought about sitting down, just for a moment, just to rest. The snow looked almost soft, almost inviting. People said freezing to death was peaceful at the end, that you just fell asleep and never woke up. Maybe that would not be such a terrible way to go. Better than starving, better than disease, better than so many other deaths she had witnessed in her short life. No. The thought came fierce and sudden. She had not come this far to give up. Thomas was out there somewhere, and he was waiting for her, even if he did not know it. She forced her legs to keep moving, forced one foot in front of the other, forced herself to breathe despite the way the cold air burned her lungs. That was when she saw the light. At first, she thought it was a hallucination, some trick her freezing brain conjured to give her false hope. But she blinked, rubbed her eyes with numb fingers, and the light remained, flickering orange and warm through the white curtain of falling snow. A cabin, she realized. Someone had built a cabin out here in this God-forsaken wilderness, and they had a fire burning. Rebecca stumbled toward it, pulling Daisy along, though the horse needed no encouragement now. The mare had sensed shelter and moved with renewed purpose, despite her injured leg. The distance seemed endless, each step a monumental effort, but Rebecca kept the light in her vision and refused to stop moving. If she stopped now, she would never start again. The cabin materialized out of the storm like something from a dream. It was small but solid, built from thick logs chinked with mud and moss, with a stone chimney from which smoke poured, that blessed smoke that meant fire and warmth and life. A small barn stood beside it, and Rebecca could see other horses moving inside, dark shapes in the shelter. She reached the door and pounded on it with all the strength she had left, which was not much. Her fist made weak, pathetic sounds against the wood, and she wondered if anyone inside could even hear her over the howling wind. She tried to call out, but her voice came as barely a whisper, her throat too cold to work properly. The door opened. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered, backlit by the fire inside so she could not see his face clearly. He wore a thick wool shirt and denim pants, and his dark hair was slightly long, touching his collar. For a moment, they just stared at each other, her on the threshold of death and him blocking the path to life. Then he moved, fast and purposeful, catching her as her legs finally gave out. Rebecca felt strong arms around her, felt herself being lifted and carried inside, heard him calling out to someone else in the cabin. The warmth hit her like a physical blow, and she gasped, her body suddenly registering just how cold it had been outside. "Get the horse," the man said, his voice deep and commanding. "She is injured, but she will make it if we are quick." Another voice responded, younger, and Rebecca heard boots running past toward the door. The man carrying her moved deeper into the cabin, setting her down near the fireplace on what felt like a pile of blankets. His hands moved over her quickly, checking for injuries, and his face came into focus as her eyes adjusted to the light. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with strong features that spoke of hard living and honest work. His eyes were a striking gray-blue, like storm clouds over the ocean, and they held genuine concern as they studied her. A few days' worth of beard shadowed his jaw, and there was a scar above his left eyebrow, a thin white line that suggested an old wound. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his hands already working to unwrap the frozen layers of clothing from her body. "What is your name?" Rebecca tried to answer, but only a croaking sound emerged. He nodded as if he understood and kept working, efficient but gentle, removing her ice-crusted coat and the shawl beneath it. When he reached her hands, he sucked in a breath, and she looked down to see her fingers were white and waxy, the color completely gone from them. "Frostbite," he said quietly, "but maybe not too bad. We will know more once we warm them up properly." He turned his head and raised his voice. "Peter, get some lukewarm water, not hot, and bring more blankets." The younger voice responded from near the door. "Horse is in the barn, Preston. She has a bad leg, but I wrapped it. And yes, sir, getting the water now. Preston. So that was his name. Preston something. And he lived out here in the middle of nowhere with someone named Peter, and by pure chance or divine intervention, Rebecca had stumbled to his door instead of dying in the snow. Preston wrapped her in dry blankets, thick wool that smelled of cedar and smoke, and rubbed her arms and legs through the fabric, trying to restore circulation. A boy appeared, maybe 14 or 15, carrying a basin of water. He had the same gray-blue eyes as Preston and similar features, clearly a younger brother or perhaps a son, though Preston seemed too young to have a teenage child. "This is going to hurt," Preston warned, and then he placed her hands in the water. He was right. The pain was immediate and excruciating, like thousands of needles stabbing into her flesh all at once. Rebecca cried out, trying to pull away, but Preston held her hands firm in the water, his grip gentle but unyielding. "I know," he said softly. "I know it hurts. But you have to let the feeling come back slowly. If we warm them too fast, you could lose them." Rebecca bit down on her lip and endured it, tears streaming down her face. Preston kept talking to her, his voice low and steady, telling her she was doing well, that she was brave, that the worst would pass soon. Peter brought her a tin cup of something hot, tea she thought, sweetened with honey, and she sipped it between gasps of pain while Preston tended to her hands. Gradually, the agony faded to a burning ache and then to tingling discomfort. Color returned to her fingers, first red and angry, then slowly back to something approaching normal. Preston examined them carefully, flexing each finger, checking her palms and the backs of her hands. "I think you will keep them," he said finally. "You were lucky. Another hour out there and it would be a different story." Rebecca found her voice at last. It came out hoarse and scratchy, but it worked. "Thank you. You saved my life." Preston met her eyes and something passed between them, some connection she did not have words for. "What were you doing out there in this storm? White Pine is miles from here and there is nothing else close by." "Looking for my brother," Rebecca said. "Thomas Barrett." He is supposed to be working at one of the mining camps north of here. I left White Pine this morning before the storm came in. I thought I had time." Preston and Peter exchanged glances. The younger boy spoke up. "Was the camp called Silver Ridge? Because that closed down 3 weeks ago." Most of the miners moved on to Virginia City. Rebecca's heart sank. "I did not know. I had a letter from him 6 months ago saying he was there. I have been traveling from Missouri to find him." 6 months is a long time in mining country," Preston said gently. "Camps open and close fast." "But Virginia City is not far, relatively speaking. Once this storm passes, we can help you get there to look for him." "I have no way to repay you," Rebecca said quietly. "For saving me, for helping me. I have a little money saved, but not much." Preston waved this away. "Out here, we help each other or we all die. It is as simple as that. You can stay until the storm passes and you are strong enough to travel. We have food enough for 3, and Peter here likes having someone new to talk to since I am apparently boring company." Peter grinned. "You are not boring, Preston. You just do not appreciate my stories about the horses the way you should." The easy affection between them warmed Rebecca almost as much as the fire. "Are you brothers?" she asked. "He is my nephew," Preston explained. "Though I have been raising him since he was 5, so we are more like brothers now. Our parents died in a cholera outbreak back in 1870. It was just the 2 of us after that." There was a weight of grief in those simple words, a whole history of loss and survival. Rebecca understood that weight. She carried her own version of it. "I am sorry," she said. Preston shrugged, a gesture that suggested he had made peace with old pain. "It was a long time ago. We have done well enough. Built this place 3 years back, run some cattle, do some trapping. It is a simple life, but it is ours." The storm raged outside for 3 days. During that time, Rebecca learned what it meant to be truly grateful for shelter and kindness. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms really, a main living area with the fireplace and a loft above where Peter slept. Preston gave Rebecca his bed in the small back room and made himself a pallet near the fire, refusing all her protests that she could not take his space. "You need proper rest to recover," he insisted. "I have slept in worse places than next to a warm fire, believe me." She learned their routines, the rhythm of life in this isolated place. Preston woke before dawn to tend the animals, checking on the horses and the small herd of cattle sheltered in a canyon behind the cabin. He was methodical and patient in his work, never rushed, always thorough. Peter helped with everything, still learning but capable, and Preston taught him with the same patience he showed the animals. Rebecca helped where she could, though her hands were still tender and weak. She cooked meals which both men appreciated enormously, since their own cooking apparently consisted mostly of beans and burnt meat. She mended clothes, organized their chaotic supplies, cleaned and swept. Small tasks, but they made her feel less like a burden. But it was in the evenings, when the work was done, and they sat by the fire, that Rebecca truly came to know Preston Elliott. That was his full name, she learned. Preston James Elliott, and he had come west from Ohio after his parents died, determined to build something of his own in this new territory. He had worked on ranches, driven cattle north on the long trails, saved every penny until he had enough to buy this land and build this cabin. He spoke with a quiet intensity about the land, about the mountains and valleys of Nevada, about the harsh beauty of this place that killed the careless and rewarded the persistent. He knew the names of birds and plants, could read weather in the shape of clouds, understood the patterns of animals and seasons. This was not book learning but survival knowledge, earned through experience and attention. Peter shared stories too, mostly funny tales about horses who outsmarted him or near disasters while learning to rope cattle. He clearly idolized Preston, and just as clearly, Preston loved the boy fiercely, protecting him and guiding him while letting him grow into his own person. Rebecca found herself talking as well, sharing stories of her own travels and losses. She told them about Missouri, about the farm and her parents, about the long journey west and the various towns where she had worked. She had not meant to share so much, had learned to keep her past private and her heart guarded, but something about this cabin and these two people made her feel safe enough to open up. On the second night, as wind rattled the shutters and snow piled higher against the walls, Preston asked her about her brother. "What is he like, this Thomas you are searching for?" Rebecca smiled, picturing her brother's face. "Charming. That is the first word that comes to mind. He could talk his way into or out of anything. When we were children, he once convinced our neighbor that the moon was made of cheese and he had personally tasted it. He was 9 years old, and she believed him." Preston laughed, a deep, warm sound that filled the cabin. "I would like to meet this silver-tongued brother of yours. He left Missouri 2 years before I did," Rebecca continued. "After Mother died, he said there was nothing left for us there, that the future was in the West. He promised to write, to send for me once he was established somewhere." The letters came regularly at first, then less often, then almost not at all. "The last one I received was 6 months ago from Silver Ridge, so I saved everything I could and came west to find him." "You must love him very much," Peter said, "to come all this way alone." "He is the only family I have left," Rebecca said simply. "Of course I came." Preston was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Family is everything, I understand that. When my parents died and I suddenly had a 5-year-old to care for, everyone said I should put him in an orphanage, that I was too young to raise a child. But he was my sister's boy, my own blood. How could I abandon him? I was a handful too," Peter added cheerfully. "Cried every night for months. Preston never complained, not once." "You were grieving," Preston said gently. "You had every right to cry." The affection between them was palpable, and Rebecca felt something twist in her chest, a longing for that kind of connection, that sense of belonging. She had spent so long alone, working and saving and traveling, always focused on the goal of finding Thomas, that she had forgotten what it felt like to simply be part of something, to have people who cared about you. On the third morning, Rebecca woke to silence. The howling wind had stopped. She rose from the bed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and ventured into the main room. Preston was already awake, standing by the window, looking out at the transformed world. Snow had buried everything. Drifts reached halfway up the cabin walls, and the landscape was a pristine white expanse broken only by the dark shapes of trees and the thin line of smoke from their chimney. The sky was clear and painfully blue, and the sun reflecting off the snow was almost blinding. "It stopped," Rebecca said, stating the obvious. Preston turned to her and nodded. "Storm has passed, but the roads, such as they are, will be impassable for days. The snow is too deep and there will be more storms coming. Winter has arrived in earnest." Rebecca's heart sank. "So I cannot get to Virginia City to look for Thomas." "Not immediately," Preston admitted. "But Virginia City is not going anywhere, and if your brother is there, he will still be there in a few weeks. Mining towns do not empty out in winter. Everyone holes up and waits for spring." "A few weeks," Rebecca repeated. The words felt heavy. She had been so close, or so she thought. The idea of waiting weeks, maybe even months, before she could continue her search was almost unbearable. Preston must have seen something in her face, because he crossed the room and stood before her, his expression gentle. "I know it is not what you want to hear, But traveling in these mountains in winter is deadly. You almost died 3 days ago, and that was just the first storm of the season. There will be bigger ones, worse ones. If you try to push through now, you will not make it. So what am I supposed to do? Rebecca asked, hating the helplessness in her voice. Just wait here and impose on your hospitality for weeks. It is not an imposition, Preston said firmly. You would be welcome to stay as long as needed. We have supplies for the winter, enough for 3 people easily. And honestly, having another adult around would be helpful. Peter is good company, but he is still learning, and sometimes it would be nice to have someone to talk to who understands things beyond horse training and card games. Peter emerged from the loft, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I am standing right here, you know. I can hear you saying I am not sophisticated enough. Preston grinned at him. You are plenty sophisticated. I just meant Rebecca here might have opinions on things you and I do not normally discuss. Like what? Peter challenged. Like literature, or music, or fashion, or any number of things, Preston said. Rebecca found herself smiling despite her disappointment about the travel situation. I am afraid I have not had much time for literature or music in recent years. And my fashion opinions would be very boring, since I have worn the same 3 dresses in rotation for months now. See, Peter said triumphantly. She is just like us, practical and focused on surviving. Over the following days, Rebecca settled into life at the cabin with surprising ease. Preston had been right about the weather. More storms came, blanketing the landscape in ever deeper snow. The world shrank to the cabin and the barn and the small area they could clear around the buildings. They were isolated, cut off from the rest of humanity, and yet Rebecca did not feel trapped. Instead, she felt almost peaceful, as if the winter was giving her a chance to catch her breath after 2 years of constant motion and worry. She fell into routines with Preston and Peter. She cooked and baked, making proper meals that brought genuine joy to their faces. She discovered that Preston had a talent for woodworking, carving beautiful pieces during the long evenings, animals and birds with remarkable detail. Peter was teaching himself to read better, slowly working through a battered copy of Ivanhoe that had belonged to his mother, and Rebecca began helping him, reading passages aloud and explaining difficult words. But it was her growing friendship with Preston that surprised her most. They talked constantly, about everything and nothing, discovering they shared views on many things and enjoyed debating the topics where they disagreed. Preston was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. And he shared his own thoughts and feelings with an openness that was rare in men, at least in Rebecca's experience. She found herself watching him when he did not notice, admiring the efficient way he moved, the strength in his hands, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at Peter. He was handsome, she acknowledged privately, but it was more than that. There was something solid about Preston Elliott, something steady and trustworthy. He was a man who kept his word, who honored his obligations, who would stand by those he cared about no matter the cost. One evening in early December, after Peter had gone up to the loft to sleep, Rebecca and Preston sat by the fire, sharing a pot of tea. Snow fell gently outside and the cabin was warm and quiet. Preston was carving something, his hands moving with practiced skill while Rebecca mended one of Peter's shirts. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Of course," Preston replied, not looking up from his work. "Why did you never marry?" "A man like you, with land and a good heart, women must have shown interest." Preston's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed carving. "A few have shown interest over the years, I suppose, but I was always focused on other things. building this place, raising Peter, keeping us fed and sheltered. Romance seemed like a luxury I could not afford. And now, Rebecca asked, surprised by her own boldness. Now Preston did look up, meeting her eyes. The firelight played across his face, highlighting his strong features. Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just using responsibility as an excuse because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of caring for someone and losing them, Preston said quietly. Like I lost my parents, my sister. Everyone I have ever truly loved except Peter has been taken from me. It makes a man cautious about opening his heart. Rebecca set down her mending, her full attention on him. I understand that fear. After my parents died, after Thomas left, I convinced myself I was better off alone, that needing people only led to pain. And now? Preston echoed her earlier question back to her. Rebecca smiled softly. Now I think maybe I was wrong too. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken meaning. Preston set down his carving and leaned forward slightly. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. These past few weeks, having you here, I have felt something I have not felt in a very long time. Maybe ever. I know the circumstances are strange, and I know you are here because you need shelter, not because you chose me or this place. But I cannot let this winter pass without being honest with you. Rebecca's heart began to pound. What are you saying? I am saying that I have feelings for you, Preston said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. Strong feelings. I think about you constantly. I find myself looking forward to our conversations, to seeing you smile, to hearing you laugh. You have brought light into this cabin, into my life, and I do not want that light to disappear when spring comes. Rebecca sat frozen, a dozen emotions warring inside her. Joy, fear, hope, uncertainty. Preston, I feel the same way, but I have to find Thomas. He is my brother, my family. I cannot abandon that search. I would never ask you to, Preston said quickly. When spring comes and the passes are clear, I will take you to Virginia City myself. We will search every mine, every camp, every saloon until we find him. And if he is not there, we will keep looking. Your quest to find your brother does not have to end just because you have feelings for me. But what if we cannot find him? Rebecca asked, voicing the fear she had carried for months. What if he moved on or something happened to him? I could search forever. Preston reached across the space between them and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. Then we search forever, together. But Rebecca, you do not have to be alone anymore. Whatever happens, whatever we find or do not find, you have a place here, with me, if you want it. Tears pricked Rebecca's eyes. For so long she had been alone, shouldering every burden by herself, trusting no one because trust had been repeatedly broken. But Preston was offering her something different, something she had thought she would never have. A partner. A home. Love, I want it, she whispered. I want you. But I am afraid. So am I, Preston admitted. But maybe being afraid together is better than being safe and alone. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle and sweet, tentative, a question more than a demand. Rebecca answered by kissing him back, her hand coming up to cup his bearded cheek, her body leaning into his warmth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing a little faster, Preston rested his forehead against hers. Let this winter be our beginning, he said softly. Not your end, but our start. Together. Together, Rebecca repeated, and the word felt like a promise. The winter deepened around them, but inside the cabin, warmth grew. Preston and Rebecca's relationship blossomed in those cold months, progressing with the natural ease of two people who genuinely liked each other as much as they were attracted to each other. They held hands while sitting by the fire. They stole kisses when Peter was not looking, and sometimes when he was, which made the boy roll his eyes dramatically and complain about how disgusting adults were. But Peter was happy too. Rebecca could see it in the way he smiled more, joked more, seemed lighter. He told her one day, while they were kneading bread together, that he had never seen Preston this content before. "He has always taken care of me," Peter said, "but I do not think he ever took care of himself, you know. He never seemed to think about what would make him happy." "But you make him happy, I can tell." "He makes me happy too," Rebecca said honestly. "Both of you do. I came west looking for my brother and I found him waiting for me, but I found this too and I did not even know I needed it." Christmas came, and they celebrated simply, with a special meal Rebecca prepared and small gifts they had made for each other. Preston gave Rebecca a carved wooden box with a fitted lid, perfect for storing letters and small treasures. Peter gave her a pair of mittens he had knitted himself, lumpy and uneven but warm and made with genuine effort. Rebecca gave Peter a new shirt she had sewn from fabric Preston had stored away, and she gave Preston a scarf she had knitted during the long evenings, using wool she had carefully unraveled from an old blanket and respun. But the best gift was the one they shared together, unspoken but understood. They were a family now, the three of them. Chosen family, built not by blood but by circumstance and affection and commitment. As January arrived and the new year of 1882 began, Rebecca found herself thinking less about Virginia City and more about what came after. She still needed to find Thomas, still felt that obligation in her bones. But now she had something else too. She had Preston, who loved her with a steady devotion that made her feel cherished and safe. She had Peter, who had adopted her as an honorary aunt and came to her for advice and comfort. She had this cabin, this life, and she wanted to keep it. On a clear, cold day in late January, Rebecca and Preston stood together outside the cabin, looking at the mountains. The sun was bright but offered little warmth, and their breaths came in white clouds. Preston's arm was around her shoulders and she leaned into his side. "You think he is alive?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Thomas, do you think I will find him?" Preston was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think if he is alive, we will find him, and if he is not, we will find out what happened. Either way, you will have answers, and either way, you will not be alone." "When I left Missouri," Rebecca said, "I thought I was so strong. I thought I could handle anything by myself. But this winter has taught me that strength does not mean refusing help. It means knowing when to accept it." "You are the strongest woman I have ever met," Preston said, turning to face her. "You survived things that would have broken most people. You crossed half a continent alone, survived a blizzard that should have killed you, and you still have hope and kindness in your heart. That is real strength, Rebecca." She looked up at him, this man who had saved her life and then, somehow, had saved her heart. "I love you," she said, the words simple but weighted with complete truth. "I do not know when it happened exactly, but I love you, Preston Elliott." His face transformed, joy lighting his features like sunrise. "I love you too. More than I thought possible, more than I have words for." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Rebecca felt the last walls around her heart crumble completely. She was his and he was hers, and whatever the future brought, they would face it together. That night, after Peter had gone to sleep, Preston asked Rebecca to marry him. There was no ring, no formal bending of the knee, just the two of them by the fire, holding hands, speaking truths. "I know it has only been a few months," Preston said. "I know by normal standards we should wait, court properly, do things the right way. But nothing about our situation has been normal, and out here, normal rules do not always apply. I want you to be my wife, Rebecca. I want to build a life with you, a real life. Will you marry me?" Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Absolutely yes. They decided to wait until spring when they could get to White Pine and have a proper ceremony with a preacher. But in their hearts, they were already married, already committed. Preston moved Rebecca's things into his room, and she slept in his arms every night after that, warm and safe and loved. February brought more snow, but also signs that winter was beginning to loosen its grip. The days grew slightly longer, the sun a bit stronger. By early March, the snow began to melt in earnest, revealing the land beneath. Streams ran high with runoff, and the first brave plants began pushing through the cold earth. Preston declared the passes would be clear enough for travel by mid-March. He began preparing for the journey to Virginia City, checking supplies, ensuring the horses were ready. Rebecca felt nervousness building inside her, anticipation mixed with dread. After all this time, she would finally know the truth about Thomas. They left on a crisp morning in mid-March, the three of them on horseback, with a pack mule carrying supplies. Peter came along because, as he pointed out, someone had to make sure Preston and Rebecca did not get too distracted by each other to remember basic things like eating and setting up camp. They made good time, the trails difficult but passable, and reached White Pine after 2 days of travel. The town was just waking from its winter torpor, businesses reopening, people emerging from homes like bears from hibernation. They stopped first at the general store, where Preston purchased a few supplies and asked about anyone headed to Virginia City who might have news of Thomas Barrett. The store owner, a grizzled man named Henderson, scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Barrett, you say? I knew a Thomas Barrett came through here last summer on his way to Silver Ridge. Friendly fellow, always had a story to tell." "That is him," Rebecca said eagerly. "Do you know where he went after the camp closed?" Henderson shook his head. "Silver Ridge closed sudden-like, and most of the miners scattered. Some went to Virginia City, some to Gold Hill, some clear over to California. But if you are looking for him, your best bet is Virginia City. It is the biggest operation around these days." They spent the night in White Pine, getting a room at the small hotel, and Preston made arrangements with the preacher for their return trip. In 1 week, they would come back through and be married, assuming they found Thomas and could convince him to attend. Virginia City was another 3 days' journey, and when they finally arrived, Rebecca was stunned by the size of it. Thousands of people filled the streets, miners and merchants and gamblers and families, all drawn by the Comstock load's seemingly endless silver. Buildings climbed the mountainside in haphazard tiers, and the constant sound of stamp mills crushing ore echoed through the valley. They began their search methodically, starting with the mining company offices. The clerks were helpful but had no record of a Thomas Barrett working any of the current claims. They checked the saloons next, showing Thomas's description, and finally got a lead. A bartender at a place called the Lucky Dollar remembered a charming fellow named Tom who had worked as a dealer for a few months. "But he left around Christmas," the bartender said. "Said he had saved enough money and was heading to San Francisco. Wanted to try city living for a while." San Francisco. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. After all this, after crossing the country and surviving the winter and traveling through mountain passes, Thomas had moved on. Again, Preston saw her distress and wrapped an arm around her. "We can go to San Francisco," he said quietly. "If that is what you need to do." But Rebecca shook her head slowly. "No, no, I do not think so." They found a small restaurant and sat down, ordering food they barely tasted. Peter wisely stayed quiet, sensing this was a conversation the adults needed to have. Rebecca stared at her plate, processing her tangled emotions. "I am angry," she said finally. "Is that terrible? I am angry at Thomas for making me chase him across the entire West." Angry that he kept moving without telling me, that he did not wait, that he apparently has no idea I have been trying to find him. It is not terrible, Preston said gently. It is human. But I am also relieved, Rebecca continued, because the bartender said he saw him at Christmas, which means Thomas is alive and well and living his life. He is not hurt or dead or in trouble. He is just being Thomas, charming and restless and moving on to the next adventure. So what do you want to do? Preston asked. Rebecca looked at him, at this wonderful man who had offered to take her to San Francisco even though it was clearly not what he wanted, who had supported her search even knowing it might take her away from him. She reached across the table and took his hand. I want to go home, she said. Back to the cabin. Back to White Pine to get married like we planned. Thomas is alive and he is fine, and maybe someday our paths will cross again, but I do not need to keep chasing him. I have spent 2 years of my life focused on finding him, and in the process, I almost missed finding you. Preston's relief was visible. Are you certain I meant what I said? We can keep looking. I am certain, Rebecca said firmly. Thomas made his choice to keep moving, and I am making mine to stay, to build something permanent with you. Maybe I will write to him, send letters to San Francisco and hope they find him. But I am done putting my life on hold. Peter, who had been uncharacteristically silent, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean we can go home soon? Because I miss the horses. Both Rebecca and Preston laughed, the tension breaking. Yes, Preston said. We are going home. They left Virginia City the next morning and made their way back to White Pine, taking their time, enjoying the journey now that the desperate urgency had lifted. The spring landscape was coming alive around them, green things pushing through the earth, animals emerging from winter dens, birds returning from southern migrations. The world was renewing itself, and Rebecca felt like she was too, shedding the old desperation and embracing something new. They reached White Pine on a sunny afternoon, and Preston went directly to find the preacher. Reverend Matthews was a kind older man who had been serving the scattered communities of Nevada for 30 years. He agreed to perform the ceremony the next day, giving them time to prepare. Rebecca had no fancy dress, but the women at the hotel helped her clean and press her best outfit, a dark blue dress that brought out her eyes. Preston borrowed a proper suit from Henderson at the general store, and Peter slicked his hair down with water and complained loudly about having to look civilized. The ceremony took place in the small church at the edge of town, with a handful of curious townspeople in attendance, because there was not much entertainment in White Pine, and a wedding was always an event. Reverend Matthews spoke about love and commitment, and the challenges of building a life in harsh country. He talked about how marriage was like a partnership in mining, how both people had to work together to extract the precious ore from the difficult rock of daily life. When he asked Preston if he would take Rebecca as his wife, Preston's "I will" rang clear and strong through the church. When he asked Rebecca if she would take Preston as her husband, she looked into those storm cloud eyes and said, "I will," with complete certainty. They exchanged simple gold bands that Preston had purchased from Henderson, both of them surprised by how right it felt to wear them. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife and told Preston he could kiss his bride, Preston did so thoroughly, to the point where Peter made exaggerated gagging sounds and the townspeople applauded and laughed. They celebrated with a meal at the hotel, joined by several of the townspeople who had attended the ceremony. Henderson brought out a bottle of good whiskey he had been saving, and toasts were made to the newlyweds' health and happiness. It was simple and imperfect and absolutely perfect. That night in their hotel room, Preston and Rebecca consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. She had been nervous, having limited experience in such matters, but Preston was patient and gentle, taking his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. When they finally came together completely, Rebecca felt a sense of rightness that went beyond the physical, a soul-deep recognition that this was where she belonged. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow hotel bed, speaking softly in the darkness. Preston traced patterns on Rebecca's arm, his touch light and soothing. "I still cannot quite believe this is real," Rebecca murmured. "That I am married to you, that I have a home and a future. 6 months ago I was alone in Missouri with nothing but hope and stubbornness. And now—" Preston prompted. "Now I have everything," Rebecca said simply. "You, Peter, the cabin, a life. It is more than I ever dared to dream of." Preston kissed her forehead. "We will build something beautiful together, I promise you that. When we get back to the cabin, we will start planning. Maybe expand the cabin, add more rooms. Start building a real ranch, not just a few cattle but a proper herd. And when you are ready, maybe children of our own." "I would like that," Rebecca said. "All of it. Though we should probably focus on expanding the cabin before adding children, so Peter does not end up sharing a loft with crying babies." Preston chuckled. "Practical as always. It is one of the many things I love about you." They made love again in the early morning hours, and this time Rebecca was less nervous, more confident, learning what pleased him and discovering what pleased her. The sun was well up by the time they finally emerged from their room to find Peter waiting with an expression of elaborate patience. "Good morning, married people," he said dryly. "Nice of you to remember the rest of the world exists." "Mind your tongue," Preston said, but he was grinning. "That is my wife you are addressing." Peter's expression softened. "She was already my family before the ceremony. The paperwork just makes it official." Rebecca hugged him impulsively, and after a moment of teenage awkwardness, Peter hugged her back. "Thank you for sharing your uncle with me," she said quietly. "I know this changes things." "Changes them for the better," Peter said firmly. "Now come on, let us get breakfast and head home." I was not joking about missing the horses. The journey back to the cabin took 3 days, but they were the happiest 3 days of Rebecca's life. Spring was in full bloom now, the meadows carpeted with wildflowers, the streams running clear and cold with snowmelt. They saw deer and elk, caught fish for dinner, slept under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Preston was affectionate and attentive, finding every excuse to touch her, hold her hand, steal kisses. Rebecca felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before, truly valued for who she was. And Peter seemed genuinely happy for them, without resentment or jealousy, secure in his place in their expanding family. When the cabin finally came into view, Rebecca felt a rush of emotion. This was home now. Not Missouri, not some imagined future with Thomas, but this small, solid building in the Nevada mountains where Preston and Peter had built a life, and now welcomed her into it. They settled back into routines, but everything felt different now, better. Rebecca threw herself into planning the cabin expansion with Preston. They spent evenings sketching ideas, debating layouts, arguing good-naturedly about whether they needed one additional room or two. They decided on 2, one that would eventually be Peter's as he got older and needed more privacy, and one that could serve as storage now but be converted to a nursery later if needed. Preston began the construction work in April, with Rebecca and Peter helping where they could. It was hard physical labor, but satisfying, watching walls rise and take shape. Neighbors from the scattered ranches around them stopped by to help, and Rebecca met the few other families who lived in this isolated area. They were kind people, hardened by the harsh life but generous with their time and knowledge. By early June, the addition was complete, rough but functional. They celebrated with a small gathering, inviting the neighbors who had helped, roasting a side of beef, and sharing stories late into the night. Rebecca watched Preston laughing with the other men, saw how respected he was in this small community, and felt pride swell in her chest. This was her husband, her partner, her love. That night, after everyone had gone and Peter had stumbled up to the loft exhausted from the party, Preston led Rebecca to their room and closed the door. He cupped her face in his hands, his expression serious. "I want you to know something," he said. "Even if we never find Thomas, even if you never get the reunion you hoped for, I will never make you feel guilty about it. He is your brother, and you have every right to keep hoping and searching. I will never be jealous of that love or ask you to choose between us." Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes. "I know. That is part of why I love you so much. You understand loyalty and family and obligation. You would never ask me to abandon those things because you know their value. But Preston, I need you to understand something too. I am not giving up on Thomas or abandoning him. I am just choosing to build my life here while hoping our paths cross again someday. That is different." "I know," Preston said softly, "and it is the right choice. For you, for us, for our future." They made love slowly that night, tenderly, speaking without words about commitment and trust and the future they were building together. Afterward, Rebecca lay in Preston's arms and thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. A blizzard that should have killed her. A cabin appearing out of the storm. A man who saved her life and then captured her heart. She thought winter was her end. He said let it be their beginning together in warmth. And he had been right. Summer came to the Nevada mountains, hot days and cool nights, hard work and simple pleasures. Rebecca and Preston worked side by side, managing the growing herd of cattle, tending a garden Rebecca planted, maintaining the buildings and fences. Peter continued learning, growing taller seemingly by the day, his voice deepening, his skills with horses and cattle improving. In August, Rebecca realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, then another before telling Preston. He had been outside splitting wood, and when she approached him with the news, he froze mid-swing, the axe suspended in the air. "Are you certain?" he asked, carefully setting down the tool. "Not completely," Rebecca admitted, "but I have never been late before, and I have been feeling strange in the mornings, queasy, tired." Preston's face transformed, wonder and joy flooding his features. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby, a child, our child." Rebecca laughed, dizzy from spinning and happiness. "Yes, it seems we are. Are you pleased, pleased?" Preston set her down carefully as if she were suddenly made of glass. "I am beyond pleased. I am ecstatic. I am terrified. I am everything." Peter appeared from the barn, drawn by the commotion. "What is going on? Why is everyone shouting?" Preston looked at Rebecca, asking permission with his eyes. She nodded, and he turned to Peter with a huge grin. "Rebecca is going to have a baby. You are going to be an uncle." "Well, technically a cousin, but we call you my nephew even though you are really my sister's son, so the titles are all confused anyway. The point is, there is going to be a baby." Peter's eyes went wide. "Really? A baby? Here?" He paused, considering. "I guess we finished that addition just in time." The pregnancy progressed normally, though Rebecca found the summer heat exhausting. Preston was almost comically protective, constantly worried she was doing too much, insisting she rest more. She tolerated his fussing because she knew it came from love, but she also made clear she was not an invalid and would continue working as long as she was able. In September, they rode to White Pine to see the doctor there, an older physician named Dr. Winters who had delivered half the babies in the region. He examined Rebecca and declared her healthy and the baby due sometime in late February or early March. "You're first?" he asked, and when Rebecca nodded, he smiled. "You are in good hands with Preston. He helped birth more calves and foals than I can count, I wager. The principles are similar." Preston turned bright red. "That is not the same thing at all." Dr. Winters laughed. "Not exactly, no, but it helps to have steady hands and a calm demeanor, which you have in abundance. Just make sure you send for me when her time comes if the weather allows. I would rather attend the birth than have you try to manage it alone." They returned home with supplies and instructions, and Rebecca felt more confident knowing there was a plan. The autumn passed peacefully, the work slowing as winter approached. Rebecca's belly grew, and she felt the first flutters of movement in October, growing stronger through November. Preston talked to the baby constantly, his hand resting on Rebecca's stomach, telling their child about the ranch and the mountains and the life they would have. He read aloud in the evenings, sharing books from his small collection, convinced the baby could hear and should be exposed to good literature. Peter tolerated the baby talk with good-natured patience and occasionally contributed observations like, "Just so you know, baby, horses are better than people. And if you cry too much, I am sleeping in the barn." The first real snow came in December, and Rebecca felt the familiar anxiety that came with winter storms. But this year was different. She was not alone and freezing and desperate. She was warm and loved and safe, with Preston's arms around her at night and a child growing inside her. On Christmas morning, Preston gave her a cradle he had been secretly building in the barn. It was beautiful, made from smooth pine and maple, with carved animals dancing around the sides. Rebecca cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the love and effort it represented. "Our child will sleep in this," Preston said softly. "Safe and warm and surrounded by family. That is what I want for them, for all of us." Rebecca's due date came and went. February ended with no sign of the baby. March arrived and Rebecca grew increasingly uncomfortable, her back aching, her ankles swollen. She waddled more than walked, and even simple tasks exhausted her. On March 15th, she woke in the middle of the night to cramping pain and wetness between her legs. For a moment she was confused, and then understanding hit. "Preston," she said urgently, shaking him awake. "Preston, it is time." He bolted upright, instantly alert. "The baby, now." "Now," Rebecca confirmed, another contraction gripping her. Preston sprang into action with impressive efficiency. He woke Peter and sent him racing on horseback to fetch Dr. Winters from White Pine, then helped Rebecca into the back room and got her settled as comfortably as possible. He boiled water, gathered clean cloths and stayed by her side, holding her hand through each contraction. The labor was long and hard. Dr. Winters arrived by mid-morning, having ridden through the night with Peter, and took over with calm competence. He checked Rebecca's progress and declared everything was proceeding normally, if slowly. "First babies take their time," he said. "Could be hours yet." It was hours. Long, exhausting, painful hours. Rebecca clung to Preston's hand, squeezing until she thought she might break his fingers. He never complained, never left her side, murmuring encouragement and love constantly. When she cried that she could not do this, that it was too much, he kissed her forehead and told her she was the strongest person he knew and she could do anything. As evening approached, Dr. Winters announced she was finally ready to push. Rebecca bore down with all her remaining strength, following his instructions, focusing everything on bringing this child into the world. Preston supported her from behind, his arms wrapped around her, his voice in her ear telling her she was doing wonderfully. And then, as the sun set outside, painting the sky pink and gold, their baby entered the world with a lusty cry. "It is a boy, doctor," Winters announced, quickly clearing the baby's airways and wrapping him in a clean blanket. "A healthy, strong boy with excellent lungs." He placed the baby on Rebecca's chest, and she looked down at her son with wonder. He was red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn out gray-blue like his father's. He was perfect. Preston leaned over them both, tears streaming down his face unashamedly. "Hello, son," he said softly. "Welcome to the world." They named him Thomas Preston Elliott, honoring both Rebecca's brother and his father. Little Thomas, or Tommy as they quickly began calling him, was indeed strong-lunged and made his presence known loudly and frequently those first few weeks. Rebecca learned to function on minimal sleep, feeding him every few hours, changing countless diapers, soothing his cries. Preston helped with everything, never complaining about lost sleep or extra work. He rocked Tommy for hours when the baby was fussy, sang to him in his deep voice, changed diapers without hesitation. He was a natural father, patient and loving, and Rebecca fell in love with him all over again watching him with their son. Peter adjusted to being a big cousin with typical teenage grace, meaning he thought the baby was fine but did not understand what all the fuss was about. Still, Rebecca caught him more than once standing by the cradle, watching Tommy sleep with a soft expression on his face. He would be a good big brother figure when Tommy got older. Spring came in full force, and life settled into a new rhythm. Rebecca had thought she understood happiness before, but motherhood added a dimension she had not anticipated. Watching Tommy grow and develop, seeing Preston's face light up every time he held his son, feeling their little family knit together more tightly each day. These were joys beyond anything she had imagined. In May, a letter arrived from San Francisco, forwarded through several post offices. Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened it, recognizing her brother's handwriting. "Dear Rebecca," it began, "I heard through some miners passing through that you were looking for me last year. I am sorry I kept moving without telling you where. I guess I got caught up in the adventure and did not think about how worried you might be. I am in San Francisco now, working as a manager in a saloon. Life is good here, lots of opportunities. I have a nice room, steady income, even met a girl I like. Her name is Catherine, and she is from Boston and too smart to be interested in a rambler like me, but I am trying anyway. I would love to see you if you can ever make it to the city. If not, write to me at the address below. I want to know how you are, where you ended up if you found happiness. Your loving brother, Thomas." Rebecca read the letter twice, then handed it to Preston. He read it carefully, then looked at her with raised eyebrows. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," Rebecca said honestly. "He is alive and well and happy. And a little annoyed that he is only now thinking about how worried I might have been, but mostly relieved." "Do you want to visit him?" Preston asked carefully. Rebecca shook her head. "Someday, maybe, when Tommy is older and travel is easier, but for now I will write back. Tell him about you, about the baby, about our life here, and maybe eventually he will visit us. I would like him to meet you, to see what we have built." She wrote a long letter that evening, filling page after page with everything that had happened since she left Missouri. She told Thomas about the blizzard and how Preston saved her, about falling in love during the winter, about their wedding and the ranch and Tommy's birth. She included an invitation to visit whenever he could, and she told him she was happy, truly deeply happy, for the first time in years. When she sealed the letter and addressed it, she felt a sense of completion. The quest that had driven her across the country was finished, not with the dramatic reunion she had imagined, but with a simple letter confirming her brother was alive and well. It was enough. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch grew steadily under Preston's management. They expanded the herd, added more horses, built additional outbuildings. Peter grew into a capable young man, taking on more responsibility, learning the business side of ranching from Preston. When he turned 20, he began talking about starting his own place someday, though he made clear he would stay nearby so Tommy could grow up with family around. Tommy grew from a colicky baby into a bright, energetic toddler who kept Rebecca constantly busy. He had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's stubborn determination, a combination that meant he got into everything and feared nothing. Preston adored him completely, patient with even the most exasperating toddler behavior. When Tommy was 2, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and in late autumn of 1884, she gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Catherine Elliott, the middle name chosen to honor both Rebecca's mother and Thomas's sweetheart, whom he had married earlier that year according to his letters. Sarah was a calmer baby than Tommy had been, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes that matched Rebecca's. Preston joked that he was outnumbered now, 3-2, and would have to start a campaign to even the odds. Rebecca suggested he focus on managing the 2 children they had before thinking about more. Thomas visited when Sarah was 6 months old, bringing Catherine to meet the family. The reunion was emotional, with Rebecca and Thomas both crying and laughing as they embraced. Catherine was indeed smart and lovely, and she and Rebecca became fast friends. Thomas was impressed by the ranch and by Preston, telling Rebecca privately that he was glad she had found someone solid and dependable, since she deserved that after everything she had been through. During that visit, Thomas apologized for making Rebecca chase him across the West. "I was selfish," he said. "Always moving, never thinking about how it affected you. I am trying to be better now, more responsible. Catherine helps with that." "You do not need to apologize," Rebecca said, meaning it. "That journey brought me here to Preston and this life. I would not change it even if I could." As the 1880s progressed, the little ranch in the Nevada mountains thrived. Preston and Rebecca worked as true partners, making decisions together, supporting each other through hard times and celebrating the good times. Peter eventually did start his own small ranch a few miles away, close enough to visit regularly but far enough to have independence. He married a woman named Alice that he met in White Pine, and they started their own family. Tommy and Sarah grew up surrounded by love and family, learning to ride and work cattle almost as soon as they could walk. Rebecca taught them reading and arithmetic and the value of kindness. Preston taught them about the land, about respecting nature and working hard and keeping your word. They were good children, sometimes wild and difficult as all children were, but fundamentally kind and decent. Rebecca sometimes thought about that night in the blizzard, how close she had come to dying alone in the snow. She thought about stumbling to Preston's door, about those first weeks in the cabin when she was still searching for Thomas, still uncertain about her future. It seemed like another lifetime, another person entirely. She had thought winter was her end. Preston had said let it be their beginning together in warmth, and he had been right in ways neither of them could have imagined. That terrible winter storm had brought her not just to shelter but to home, not just to survival but to life, real life, full and rich and meaningful. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1892, Preston gave Rebecca a gift. It was a book, leather-bound and beautiful, but when she opened it, she found the pages were blank. "I thought you could write our story," Preston explained. "Everything that happened from the blizzard to now, so Tommy and Sarah and their children someday will know how we began." how a storm brought us together and how we built something lasting. Rebecca ran her fingers over the empty pages, imagining filling them with words. "It is a good story," she said softly. "It is the best story," Preston corrected, pulling her close. "Because it is ours, and it is true, and it continues every day." She kissed him, this man who had saved her life in so many ways. "Then I will write it, all of it, so everyone knows that sometimes the worst storms bring the greatest blessings." That evening, as the sun set over the Nevada mountains painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Rebecca sat down with the blank book and began to write. She wrote about the blizzard and the cabin, about falling in love during a harsh winter, about building a life and a family. She wrote about loss and hope, about searching and finding, about the unexpected paths that lead us home. Preston read over her shoulder sometimes, adding details she had forgotten, correcting her account of events to match his memory. They laughed together over the stories, remembering their early awkwardness, their first kisses, the way they had circled each other like nervous horses before finally admitting their feelings. Tommy and Sarah would beg her to read what she had written, enthralled by the story of their parents' meeting. Sarah especially loved the romantic parts, while Tommy was more interested in the survival aspects, wanting to know every detail about how to navigate in a blizzard. Rebecca filled the book over the course of several months, savoring the process of remembering and recording. When she finally wrote the last page, describing their anniversary and Preston's gift of the book itself, she felt a sense of satisfaction. This was their legacy, not just the ranch or the children, but this record of how love could emerge from hardship, how two people could find each other against all odds and build something beautiful together. The years continued to pass, bringing the normal mixture of joy and sorrow that makes up a life. They lost cattle in harsh winters and made good profits in prosperous years. The children grew and eventually left to start their own lives, Tommy to become a rancher like his father, Sarah to marry a teacher and move to Carson City. Peter's children grew up alongside their cousins, creating a web of family connections across the region. Rebecca and Preston grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces lining with age, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened with time, growing richer and more complex as they weathered life's storms together. They learned each other completely, the way old couples do, able to communicate with glances and gestures, finishing each other's thoughts. In 1900, on a crisp autumn day, they stood together on the porch of the cabin they had expanded and improved over the years. Tommy had brought their grandchildren to visit, two boys who were currently racing around the yard with inexhaustible energy. Sarah and her family would arrive tomorrow for a big gathering to celebrate Preston's 50th birthday. Can you believe it has been almost 20 years since that winter? Rebecca mused, leaning against Preston's solid warmth. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a whole different lifetime. Preston wrapped his arm around her shoulders, a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "Best storm I ever encountered. Brought me the love of my life." Rebecca turned to look at him, this man who had saved her and loved her and built a life with her. The years had been kind to him overall. He was still strong despite his age, still capable of hard work, though he left more of it to Tommy these days. His eyes were still that striking gray-blue, still warm when they looked at her. "I think about her sometimes," Rebecca said. "The woman I was that night, stumbling through the snow, convinced she was going to die. If I could go back and tell her what was waiting for her on the other side of that door, she would never believe me." "What would you tell her?" Preston asked, genuinely curious. Rebecca smiled. "I would tell her that winter was not her end, that it was a beginning." That on the other side of the storm was a man who would love her completely and a life beyond anything she had dreamed. I would tell her to keep walking, keep pushing forward, because everything she ever wanted was just ahead. Preston kissed her forehead, a gesture of affection unchanged over nearly 2 decades. I would tell the man I was, sitting in that cabin with Peter, thinking I would spend my whole life alone, that he was wrong. That love could come when you least expected it, in the form of a half-frozen woman at your door. That saving her life would turn out to be saving his own life too. They stood together as the sun set, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant colors, while their grandson's laughter echoed across the ranch. The life they had built together stretched around them, solid and real and lasting. A family, a home, a legacy of love and perseverance. Rebecca thought again about that terrible winter of 1881, about the blizzard that should have killed her. She thought about desperation and hope, about searching for one family and finding another. She thought about Preston opening that door and how everything changed in that moment. She had thought winter was her end. He said let it be their beginning together in warmth. And he had been right. That winter storm had not been an ending but a beginning, the start of the best chapter of her life. Everything that came after, all the love and joy and family and home, had grown from those seeds planted during those cold months when she learned what it meant to truly love and be loved. As darkness fell and they moved inside to the warm cabin, Preston's hand in hers, Rebecca felt profound gratitude for the strange journey that had brought her here. For the blizzard and the cabin and the man who saved her. For the winter that became their spring, their summer, their life together. Their story was written in the leather-bound book, preserved for future generations. But it was also written in the ranch they built, in the children they raised, in the love that had sustained them through everything. It was a story of survival and hope, of second chances and unexpected blessings. It was, Rebecca thought as Preston pulled her close by the fire, exactly the kind of story worth living. The kind where hardship leads to happiness, where loss leads to finding, where winter storms give way to endless warmth. The kind where a woman stumbling through snow finds not just shelter but home, not just survival but a life worth celebrating. And in the warmth of the cabin, surrounded by memories and love and the promise of family arriving tomorrow, Rebecca Barrett Elliott knew with absolute certainty that every hard step of her journey had been worth it. Every mile traveled, every hardship endured, every moment of despair, all of it had led her here to this man and this life and this profound, abiding happiness. The blizzard had brought her to Preston's door, but love had made her stay. And she would stay forever, she thought, wrapped in his arms by the fire. She would stay through all the seasons of their lives, through winters and springs and summers and autumns, through whatever storms might come. Because she was home, finally and completely home, with the man who had looked at her darkest moment and seen their brightest beginning, together in warmth just as he promised. Together in warmth for all the years remaining. Together in warmth forever.